Hey Dinesh, uh,
Hey Sanskar.
that was a great way of introducing us. So it's like a superhero entry that you did there.
Well, you did the magic, right? You called me and I was here.
Yeah. So a lot of people are tuning in right now, so we'll wait for a few more people to turn up, and then we will start off with the live
Absolutely.
stream. Uh,
Sounds good.
so yeah, how are you feeling today? There are a lot of people who are going to come to watch you speak about something that you're passionate about. So something that you'd like to share with the audience. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm very excited. Actually, I like going on to screens and going on to seminars and conferences and share whatever I have learned in the past. And if someone can benefit from that, for me, that is the greatest takeaway every single day, right? And that is part of the reason why people do open source, right?
Yeah.
Sure, there is money, there is career, there is job, everything is there. But at the end of the day, you want to have some sense of satisfaction and sense of accomplishment. That when you go to sleep, you feel like, yeah, I did something great today. Whatever small that may be or whatever big that may be. So I'm excited to see there are people who've shown interest and they want to understand more about open source because open source is not a very well understood phenomena, I'd like to call it. So it's great to see the next generation of people taking keen interest in that. So really excited. Yeah.
Yeah, so the audience who's tuning in here, I would like to tell you that we are going to do a whole session on how to start with open source and like covering everything. So all of you should stick for the live stream. And if you are excited, we should like let Dinesh also know that a lot of people have turned up. So wherever you're tuning in from, whichever city, you can just put in the name of your city that you're watching in from a particular city, and then we will show it on the screen, and Dinesh can know that a lot of people have turned up today. So whichever city you're tuning in from, you can just drop in the city name. There are a lot of people who are tuning in. People have written,
Awesome.
"Hi everyone."
Awesome.
There's someone
Yeah.
from Bangladesh.
Wow.
So whichever city you're from, someone from Punjab.
Excellent.
Um, yeah, someone thinks it's an awesome opportunity. We will completely agree with that.
Indeed.
Definitely an opportunity. We have someone from Turkey. We have someone from Bengaluru, from
Nice.
Mumbai, from Ahmedabad.
Oh, wow, that's a pan-India representation, and I see folks from outside the India in the APAC region. So thank you
Yeah,
to
not
all of you guys,
yeah,
for staying so late in the evening. I really appreciate you guys coming forward and showing up for the session.
yeah. It's not just from India, by the way. It's from Atlanta. It's from um, wait, I saw more. Miami.
Oh, nice. Yeah. East
Yeah,
Coast, I think it's the easiest for people in US East Coast to join. It's like, probably lunchtime for a lot of people. So, yes, definitely. Thank you for choosing to do your lunch while watching this session.
we have someone from wait, we have
Nice
someone
sound.
from
Nice.
Greece.
Oh, wow. Someone from Greece just joined in. Excellent.
Yeah, so like there's a pan world audience, you could say, who's here to watch you today. So
Nice.
I don't want you to feel pressurized, but then I feel it's a very it must feel very exciting to talk about something you're really passionate about
Oh,
to a
yes.
huge audience.
Yes. Yes. No, it's always great to have people from different geographies join in, right? Because they come in with different background, different cultures, and different experiences. So sometimes the questions they ask are very interesting, right? Something that you
Right.
may not have even thought about. So we'll get to see the different perspectives in the questions, I hope. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we are all here from like different places, but then our motive is the same. We want to learn more about open source
Open
from you.
source.
Yeah. So people who are asking, is it recorded? It will be available on our LinkedIn page, on our YouTube, anywhere you go to on HackerRank's platform, you can always see it. Like HackerRank's YouTube channel or HackerRank's LinkedIn account, you will always be able to see it.
Yes.
So yeah, I will just formally introduce Dinesh to everyone in the audience here today because he is someone who is like who deserves an introduction. So we'll just do that now. So Dinesh, also Dinesh, who we have here today, is has an over a decade of experience as a software engineer in different companies like Tech Mahindra, Gartner, Hexaware that we have all heard of and we all love. But he has also been the engineering manager at Cloudera and is currently an engineering leader at AMD. But apart from his professional work aside, he also does a lot of open source contributions, and he's a seasoned open source contributor, you could say. So he contributes to the Apache Hadoop Foundation, which includes the Apache Hadoop, Apache Ozone, and Apache Ratis projects. He's if I'm correct, you're a committer now, so you can,
Yes.
so you are like one step above from a contributor? Is this the correct way of saying?
I wouldn't call it as above or below, but basically, what happens is, as a contributor, you can suggest changes, but you do not have the right to absorb those changes in the project. So, a committer helps you do that, a maintainer helps you do that. They can push your changes on your behalf, and that's what really it is. It's not much different from being a contributor, just that you have a right privilege. So, it comes with its set of responsibilities and challenges. That's all it is. Yes.
Right. But then you have a lot of experience in contributing to open source. So we are all very excited to learn from you today. And hopefully this will be an exciting session for you as well. And I'm sure it'll be a knowledgeable session for all of us. So
Sure.
very excited to learn from you.
Sure. All right.
So
So if all is set, we can get started and move on. Let me know.
yes. So before starting on with the actual tutorial, I would like to ask you a few questions so that we can ease into
Mhm.
it, and then like audience can also get more context about open source contributions before we actually start with open source.
Okay.
Uh,
Sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. So, first question that I have in my mind, because we're going to learn something new today. So, why should people even be excited to contribute to open source? Like, what could be our motivation of starting to contribute to open source? Because it could be that we want to grow in your profession, but we want to learn from you. Like, what was your motivation, and what could be our
Mhm.
motivation of contributing to open source? Like, why should we start?
That is a very good question. And I think, whether already an open source contributor or whether someone is thinking of becoming a contributor to any project, they always ask this question to themselves that, why should I do it? Yeah, it's open source. Why do I care about it? Right. So before I answer that question, we need to understand what is open source, right? So have you, whenever you want to go out to a new restaurant and you want to try out some new food, right? uh, how do you decide whether I should go to this restaurant or not, right? Because there's always this worry that, oh, is this place really worth it of me going, spending time and money both, right? Or will the food be horrible when I eat there, right? So how do you decide whether I should go for a restaurant or not?
I would ask other people and get recommendations. I would search Google probably that if I should go to this restaurant or not, or see reviews.
Correct, correct. Yeah, you basically will check for reviews that public, that people have posted in Google, in Yelp or Zomato or wherever, whatever platforms that you use at, right?
Yeah,
So if you ask anybody who writes reviews, do they get paid to write those reviews? In general, no, right? I mean,
yeah,
of course, if you're a food critic, food blogger, yes, you have tie-ups, you have endorsements, but in general you do not get money, right? So you eat at some place and you really enjoy the food, so you go ahead and give them 4 star, 5 star on Google, and you say, oh, you definitely must try this pizza at this place, or this entree at this place, right?
right.
So if someone did not leave that comment, you may probably not know that this place is good, and you either have to risk it or you might not even try that restaurant out, right? So in layman words, this is also an open source phenomena, right? Because nobody asked people to leave reviews, and nobody is paying people to leave reviews. They are leaving their feedback, and you are able to benefit from that feedback, right? And if you
Hmm.
don't like something, you go and complain to the restaurant and say, oh, this is not good, that is not good, or the lighting is not good, whatever, and they make adjustments. So you are
Hmm.
doing it voluntarily, right? So
Right.
that is the whole notion of open source in a way. So what is my motivation, right? So in the early part of my career, of course, like everybody else, we use a lot of tools, we use a lot of frameworks and softwares in our job. And I always wanted to achieve something where I'm creating a program or I'm creating a tool, which in turn is being used by many other people, instead
Hmm.
of it being the end product for, say, a customer or a website that I'm building, right? I'm using Node.js or I'm using Java behind the scenes, but I think of, oh, who are those amazing people who write the lines of code for Java, so that I can use Java and build my own projects, right? So I always wanted that accomplishment in my, bucket list. It was always there that I want something like that. It can be however small or big, it doesn't matter, but I wanted that. So that was obviously my primary motivator. And then, as I went along, started doing more of data engineering related tasks. I learned that there's something called big data back in 2014, and I started exploring. And I said, okay, big data sounds an amazing thing, and I come from a Java background. The source code, a large part of it is in Java for Apache Hadoop. So I was like, yeah, let me get involved with Apache Hadoop somehow. So that was the primary driver, that I really wanted an accomplishment like that on my resume or my bucket list to be ticked off. That was the key driver there. Yes.
That's the restaurant analogy that you just used. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone was able to relate to it. And I never really thought of open source contributions in that manner. So, yeah, now every time I write a review, I will think of myself as an open source contributor to that restaurant.
Well, you
So,
are, absolutely you are. Yeah.
that sounds exciting. Okay, so I have another question that you kind of answered right now, but like, how do we find the project that we want to contribute to? So you said that you were working in Java and then you came across big data and then you
Right.
wanted to start contributing to that. But like, how can all of us like find a project that we think we should contribute to and then
Right.
volunteer to make it better?
I think partly the answer to that question, right? It is driven from what you are interested in. Like if you are somebody who are interested in the user experience or the designing the front end, so you might
Right.
be more inclined to go and contribute to something like Node.js, for example. But
Mhm.
if you are somebody who is more of a distributed systems person, right? So you will look at Hadoop or Spark or any such projects to contribute to. So it basically just boils down to your interest area. And in the modern day, if you are more interested in containerization and doing cloud and stuff, so you would be inclined to go and contribute to any of the cloud native projects like
Mhm.
Kubernetes, Prometheus, and Fluentd, all these projects. So the key driver there is interest, right? If I am somebody who's interested in backend programming and distributed systems, uh, it is futile that if I go and try to become a Node.js contributor, so
Right.
I should rather choose projects that are in my area. And there's a popular myth that people think, oh, the area where I work, there's probably not open source projects there. Actually, pretty much in every area you will have open source projects. It's just about us finding it, and it's just about how big or small that project might be. So there is open source project for pretty much everything that we do.
So you say that we should try to find open source projects in areas that we are kind of working in or like have expertise in and doing more research on finding the relevant projects in that
No,
field.
not expertise in, I mean, you don't need to have the expertise. It's just that you need to have the interest, right? Because if your interest is not there, it is very hard to break ground there, right? It is very
Yep.
hard to achieve something there. If your interest is there, you will go the extra mile, and you will, in my talk, there are certain slides that I'll cover where you will see why having the interest is so important. Because without having the interest in the right area, you will not be able to succeed in that project.
That's true. Like that's true for everything, but then
Right.
for open source, obviously, like it makes
Right.
more sense. So I would like to tell the audience that if you have any other questions to ask Dinesh, you can always drop them down in the chat and then I'll take it up, ask him, and then you can get answers from a seasoned open source contributor like him. So we already have a question that is,
Mhm.
there are some companies who don't allow open source contributions. Can we do something about it? Like if you have faced this situation before.
So, see, there are always two kinds of software, right? There's a proprietary, or what we call as closed source, and then there is open source, right? So,
Hmm.
a part of it also is dictated by where you are working, which employer you are working. If you're working for an employer and for a certain project, which is closed source by definition, of course, you cannot contribute that piece of code to open source, because you are
Yeah.
then, I mean, you are then basically violating the proprietary rights of that company by
Hmm.
taking their code and then putting out in the open source. And you do not want to do that, because not only is the legal hassle for you, but it's just an unnecessary amount of mess that you have to go through with that kind of an altercation, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. So what can you do about it? Either you find organizations which have a lot of open source related, open source focused roles, or you can always contribute to open source on the side. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to be employed at one company and then only that project you can contribute, right? Because it's
Yeah.
open, you can contribute anywhere. I mean, going back to my restaurant analogy, right? Sanskar, you're working at HackerRank, I'm working at AMD, but does that stop us from writing reviews in Google for a restaurant? It doesn't, right? So that's the same way it works.
Right. Um, so yeah, I think we can start off with the session now, where Dinesh will take you through, will take all of us through how to actually start with open source, and then what is the procedure for doing it. So all of you who are waiting for it, um, this is where it begins. So you can still ask your questions. I will ask them in the middle. So yeah,
Yes, please feel free to drop in your questions. I'll be more than happy to answer. And just don't hesitate, because I always believe that there are no stupid questions to ask. So do not feel embarrassed that, oh, it might be a simple question I shouldn't ask, right? So feel free to ask. Yeah. All right, then let's get started. I really want to thank you all for showing up from different parts of the globe. For some of you, it may be not so inconvenient. I mean, not so convenient time, but I really appreciate that. And so let's see. So I won't spend much time on this slide here. Sanskar has already done a decent introduction about me. And as far as credentials are concerned, I'm a committer in Apache Hadoop and PMC and committer in Apache Ozone. Aside from that, I've posted my GitHub link here, and you all will get a recording and a link to this slide deck. So don't worry about noting down some web references that I'm mentioning here, right? All right. So, what is open source, right? In a very, very simple terminology, open source software is something which is, the design of it is publicly accessible, right? You could go to their project web page and you can see the actual architecture and design and the code base, right? And then the next important criteria is that you are allowed to modify and reshare that code with someone else, right? Or use it in your own project. That, in the most simplest form, is what open source software is. Of course, there are a lot of fine nuances, like there are different kinds of licenses every open source project carries. Some of them are based on the BSD license, some of them are based on the GNU, General Public License, some of them have MIT license, some of them have Apache license. So different licenses have little bit of fine tuning on what you can do, what you cannot do, or what are your obligations if you want to work on those projects. But in general, basically, if you have a publicly accessible design for a project, and if you're allowed to submit modifications and share, that in a sense is the open source project. Some of the most popular examples is the Linux operating systems, right? It is as a great example of an open source software that can be, right? You have so many distributions of Linux, like some is managed by Red Hat, some is managed by Ubuntu, and there are many other flavors like OpenSUSE. So Linux is the actual open source project, and all these are the various interpretations or the modified versions of these companies. Okay? Similarly, there's Apache Software Foundation that started the HTTPD server. The Apache Tomcat is one of the most popular products that you would have used directly or indirectly. And some of the more famous projects in modern times from the Apache world is the Apache Hadoop, Apache Spark, Apache Ozone, etc. Then you have the cloud native foundation, right? So CNCF, that is where you have all the cloud native projects which are coming up as open source. So as I mentioned earlier, Kubernetes, Prometheus, Fluentd. So these are some of the key examples of popular open source projects. Okay. And while I mentioned that, and I was working, I said that I'm working at AMD. I'm sure a lot of you might be thinking, what does a hardware company have to do with open source? And so this slide basically talks about what is the state of open source at a hardware focused company like AMD, right? So AMD has a lot of research projects, contrary to popular belief, that they have put it out in the open. So some of them are mentioned here, like Omnitrace. DAGI is basically directed acyclic graph execution engine, and then you have some of the other projects focused on GPUs and kernels. Aside from their own projects, so at AMD, a lot of us contribute to Apache Hadoop, Apache Yarn, FFmpeg, and many other open source projects. And because of this reason, when you go to the AMD Careers website, you will be able to see jobs that are focused on open source software developer roles. So let me quickly show you one such job that we have right now. Right, so it says that open source software developer for Apache project. So if you have experience with Apache projects like Spark, Hadoop, etc., this job role is for you. For example, you could apply to it, right? So this is just an example, but of course there are many other such opportunities, and not just at AMD. There are many other companies who have open source focused job role positions. Right. So, what are the benefits of open source projects? Because, of course, if there are no benefits, why should we strive for something, right? So, let's first learn about the benefits, right? So, when you work with open source, you most of the time work with people that you may not physically meet. They may not be in the same company, same city, same country, right? So there is a cultural barrier, there is a language barrier, and there is a perspective barrier that you have to cross to be able to successfully collaborate in an open source project. So when you try to overcome these hurdles, you will basically take your soft skills to the next level, because how an Indian talks to an Indian versus how an Indian talks to a Japanese, or how a Japanese talks with a French person, there is a lot of perspective involved, there's a lot of understanding involved, right? So you will improve a lot of your soft skills, and of course technical skills, definitely, because you're making technical contributions. So you not only contribute technically, you not only improve these two skills, you will also improve other skills like presentation, for example, like giving seminars and conferences and talks. Another key benefit is that you are able to build your resume in a solid fashion, right? So when you work in closed source project, there is not much you can write about it in resume. There is not much details that you can talk about from an architecture standpoint, because it was a closed source. You cannot really talk about it as per your agreement with the previous company. But when you build open source products, when you work on open source contributions, it is very easy for you to say, I contributed XYZ feature in whatever Apache Hadoop project, and you can link it in your resume. So people can actually go take a look at it and understand the depth of your expertise very easily. So it helps you build your resume. And then obviously, you work in a community in the open source world. So there is community recognition, there is peer recognition. So because of this, what happens is you build a professional network, much like LinkedIn. And sometimes it can have wonderful benefits. You might learn about exciting opportunities in other organizations, or you might learn exciting new projects that someone else might be starting, and it might suit you. You might be able to switch to that project, right? And because of all of this, you always see that there are a lot of meetups, there are a lot of conferences and networking events that happen within the open source projects. So that's to foster this kind of a environment where people can learn from each other, feel like a community, and collaborate.
Right.
So I'm sure some of you who have joined today have this question, but you are not somebody who writes code. So how can you contribute? So the way you can contribute is you can improve the knowledge base. So which means there are documentation, there are tutorials, there are blogs, and most of the time people try to write software documentations in English, right? But what if there is a French audience you want to cater to? What if there is a Chinese audience you want to cater to? What if there's a Japanese audience you want to cater to, right? So if you are, say, someone who knows one of these languages, you could contribute to translating those documents correctly. Or if the documents are already translated, you could fact check them, you could improve them. So that is one of the things you can do. You can write blogs, you can write tutorials about how to use this feature in this product, how to install this product, etc. So you could use it, and when you use it, obviously you might encounter some issues here and there. You might see improperly designed section on the website. So you can advise all those improvements. So you can log those change requests, you can log those bug requests. And whenever you are associated with open source project, regardless of whether you are going to make technical or non-technical contributions, it is always great if you can educate the people around you about that open source project, and you can advocate for it, and then you can promote it. So what that basically means is when you go into conferences or meetups, if you have a conversation that's going on where your project could fit in, you always talk about it, you always bring up that topic. So that is basically your way of promoting and educating and advocating for that project, that, oh, why are you using this? You can use this project, and these are the benefits that my open source project offers versus your proprietary project. So that is how you can participate. And then some of the modern ways of doing that is you can manage the Twitter handle, for example, for that project, and you can post out important communications, and then collab with the right set of other accounts and other people, right?
So, a few questions before we move forward.
Sure.
So yeah, so first of all would be like again, like how can we find out about projects? Like, is it
Good.
more about researching, or like what would you say is the best way to come across open source projects?
So see, open source projects, right? A lot of them are managed by a few groups. For example, Apache Software Foundation. I only mentioned three names of their projects, but actually
Right.
there are hundreds of projects under the Apache Software Foundation which are open sourced. Similarly, in CNCF, there are a lot of those projects, right? So what we can do is, we can go to the websites of these foundations or these groups, and we can see all the projects that they have a description about all those projects, and then you can choose what interests you, right? So we can do that. So towards the end, actually, I have a slide where I have the links for these foundations. What I will do is when I reach that slide, I'll open up those links and show you how it lists the projects and how you can go from one project to another and try to understand the options you have.
Right. So first we should find out about groups, and then we can go in and find a project that's relevant to us. Like you will show us basically how to navigate
Right,
that.
right, right.
Yeah. So I hope that answered your question, Abhishek. Okay. So a few more questions. Right. So I think we are going to cover this already, like which problems we should first solve as a beginner contributor. In the next
Yes,
slides, we are going
yes,
to cover it. Yeah.
yes, we'll
So
do.
Gagan, we are going to cover it in the next slides. Mm, right. Yeah. So another question: how do we filter open source projects based on coding languages? Is there a way to do that, or you just have to like read through about the project and then you will get to know?
Yeah, mostly you have to read through about it, from their website. That's one way. The other way is a lot of the open source projects are eventually moving to GitHub. So I'm sure there is a way to query the GitHub API and figure out what all projects are there which are based on Java or Perl or C, C++, and things like that.
Right. Hmm.
Or,
Um,
the last way is that you do the research and you write a blog post on what are the popular C++ open source projects and Java based open source projects. So that's your entry into open source.
yeah. So now you have a blog idea, which you should do the research and put out a blog, which will be helpful for all of us. I'm pretty sure. Um, right. Okay, so another question would be a lot of open source projects are hard to understand. Like if you try to understand the entire code base, it'll be very complex. You'll not be able to do that.
Right.
So do you have to really understand that before starting to contribute, or you just have to understand like a section of the code?
So again, perfection can never be achieved. So you can never understand the project completely, and if you
Yeah.
want to wait for that, you will never be able to start with open source, right? So you just take baby steps. Basically, you get the basic understanding, and you start from there, and you improvise as you go on forward. So, and we will cover this part in one of the next slides as well.
Right. So I think yeah, so we can move forward to the next slides and we'll take up more
Uh,
questions as we move forward. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So that, I mean, you asked me all these questions at a very right juncture, Sanskar. So this slide talks about what are the popular myths, right? And somebody said that the projects are very hard, right?
Right.
So that is one of the biggest myths, actually. A lot of people think that, oh, open source, it's easy. I can just take a project, just stick my code in it, and that's it. I'm an open source contributor. It is not as easy as it sounds. There's a lot of hard work involved. There's a lot of understanding that has to happen before you can achieve that. And one of the other that at least I had in the very beginning was all good developers, do open source contributions. So if I'm not doing open source contributions in my life, I am basically not a good developer, right? So that is a big myth. It is not necessary that every good developer has to absolutely be an open source contributor, right? So, and that is a myth that all of you should shake off right at the start, because I don't want you to wait 10 years like me to get into open source contribution thinking that only good developers do it and I'm not good enough yet. So don't have that myth hanging with you for a long time. Sorry about that. The other thing is that only the committers or maintainers can review code or suggest new features. It's not like that. You cannot push the changes in, but you can always suggest people, right? So that you should always do. And reviewing code is actually one of the greatest way to understand the project, because
Hmm.
you can read enough documentation about it, enough articles about it, but at the end of the day, you have to understand the code flow before you can code. And to
Right.
understand the code flow, people should take interest in reviewing the code, because if they review the code, so you have to give feedback. And how do you give feedback without understanding something, right? So when you
Hmm.
review the code, you will actually understand that piece of the code, and you will
Hmm.
understand where this piece of code is fitting, how does it affect the existing flow. So you will very quickly gain understanding of that one flow that you are reviewing. So you need to review the code. So it's not only limited to committers and maintainers. You can read the code, review the code, and leave feedback.
Right.
All right. So getting started, right? So when you want to get started with any open source project, pretty much most of the open source projects have what they call as a README file, which has a basic set of instructions and a starting ground, like a 101 on that project. So one of the key things that you must do is read the code of conduct document and the contributor guidelines on what is acceptable to that community. For some communities, you can open a pull request, which is you are submitting your changes without asking first. But some communities want you to ask first before you open pull request. So every open source project operates differently, and you need to understand what is acceptable to that project. Otherwise, you are going to be seen as somebody who is non-compliant with their process, right? And so you
Yes.
may not get much love from the project.
Hmm.
So the next very important thing is, when you are contributing code, it's basically your creation, right? So how does the rules govern around that, right? Can you charge the open source project to give you some money for that code, right? Or do you have any right on the 100 lines of code that you are contributing? So there are a lot of these nuances that you have to understand, and a part of it involves contributor license agreement, which means you are basically signing a document which talks about the legalities of these things. That okay, you have, once you give the code to open source community, you don't have the ownership code. Like, yeah, you can claim you wrote that code, but
Yeah.
people will not pay you money to use your code, and you agree with this condition. This is just a basic outline, but there's
Hmm.
a whole lot of legal arguments around it, and that is what you have to sign and submit first.
Hmm.
And once you submit that sort of an agreement, it's basically a form that you have to read, and it's pretty much like I understand terms and conditions, and then you sign the doc. So that is what
Right.
that agreement is.
Hmm.
Once you are through with these two phases, then you can set up the version control system. Today, most of the projects are using GitHub. So you
Hmm.
basically create a copy of that project, and which is called as a fork. So fork the repository, and then you clone that in your local laptop or desktop or machine, wherever you want to work. Once you
Hmm.
do that, there will always be a guide for setting up the development environment for that project, like what version of Java, what version of Python should be installed, and what is the build tool, whether it is Maven, Gradle, Ivy, Ant, or something else, right? So you set up everything so that your code can compile in your machine. And then the next thing you should do is, every project will typically have some mailing list that you should subscribe to. Whenever you start into an open source project, the two mailing lists that you should always subscribe to is the user as well as the developer mailing list. So user is where mostly the end users will ask questions. So since you don't have expertise yet, you can be part of that distribution list. You can see what kind of questions people are answering and are receiving. That will give you some knowledge. And you can also participate. If you have knowledge, you can always respond to other people's query. And the
Right.
developer mailing list is more for people want to discuss some design approach. People are not happy with certain implementation, so they are brainstorming on let us do this, let us do that, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So that's the basics of getting started. So this, I think, was one of the questions: what kind of tasks they can pick up in the beginning when they don't have a lot of expertise. So it is very simple, right? When you are new and you do not know much about the actual code base and the architecture in a great depth, you can do the trivial and the simpler tasks. For example, add or improve the knowledge base, make trivial code changes. Like, there is a typo in the website somewhere, right? Or there is a logo that is broken, so you can update the logo of the website, or write minute and simple unit test cases wherever the code coverage is less. You can improve the log messages. If the log
Hmm.
messages are not very friendly, or not helpful, you can try to understand that workflow, understand what that error is, and then just improve the log messages, which is a very trivial change, but it will give a decent understanding. And of course, you can always do code review, but for code review, you don't have to create a ticket or a Jira or a code change. It is just like you leaving your feedback, your comment on something.
Okay.
So I'll show you some of the examples of newbie related tasks from a project called Apache Ozone that I work with. So see, this project is listed as newbie, label as newbie. So similarly, in every project, they have a way of finding the newbie related issues, or people call it easy issues, or people call it first timers. So different projects name it differently. But for that project, wherever you're contributing, you find that label and search for those kind of issues. So this is a very
Right.
trivial one. It says that add ozone logo to the website. So
Hmm.
maybe they were creating a new website and the logo was not yet there, so they want to add it. Another example is this one. So this says that whatever API test, right, should validate metrics in addition to metric specific testing. It's a newbie code because of the amount of change that has to be done. So whoever filed this Jira, so Ritesh filed this Jira, so he has written all the descriptions about what it is, what they expect somebody to pick up this and do it, right? So this is a good starting point. And similarly, we have one more right here. So these are the ways you can have the open source, initial contributions when you can pick up some simpler tasks like these. Okay.
Right. So the people who are creating the Jira task for somebody else to do something, are they also open source contributors, or they are part of the company and they want to make some changes to their website? Like, how does it work?
So anybody can log such change requests.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have to be a committer. You don't necessarily have to be working with a specific company. It can be
Hmm.
anyone. Anyone can log it. You can just create a free account and then you log a Jira like that and
Okay.
say that
And
because let's say you were going to the website of that project, right, and somewhere you found a dead link or a typo. You can go
right.
ahead and log a bug and say that, hey, on this particular page, this particular link, this is where I found a typo.
Hmm.
And then if you want to fix it, you can submit a patch, or you can just log that Jira and move on. Someone else will pick it up and fix it. Yes.
So either you can fix it yourself, or you can log a Jira task for someone else to
For
fix it.
someone else to do it, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so we have a few questions regarding the same. Ibrahim has asked that when we enter into a like a committer role or a contributor role, do we get access to that software's Jira, or like is it like a process to get it?
Yes. So typically, right, every project has its own process, but they may have a Slack channel or a Discord channel, something where you can chit chat with people. And that is why you need to subscribe to mailing list, right? If you subscribe to mailing list, you can just shoot out an email saying, I would like to log a Jira. How do I get access to the Jira? So most of the time they will say, what's your user ID? What's your GitHub ID? We will add you in the project, right? That's what they will do.
Right. So you don't get it by default. You have to ask
Of course, you
the.
have to ask somebody in the project. So the easiest way is, if you're subscribed to the distribution list, you can shoot a question and somebody will respond. Or you can look at the project website. There is a contributor guidelines that I told you in the beginning, right? They might have instructions listed there on how to get access to the Jira.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Uh, so Ibrahim also wrote something really nice that I think you are also saying from quite some time, that we should all start small. And then his current approach is to first download the code from Git and run it on my local machine. And he's trying to do some tweaks on his code. So I think he's a
absolutely.
beginner in the open source field. So yeah,
Absolutely. That is how, we cannot start big, right? We always have to start small, no matter what, whether it's open source or anything in general. And then we can enhance and build on top of that.
right. That makes sense. Wait, I'll just check for more questions. Uh,
Sanskar, I just have few more slides. Let's finish off the slides quickly, and we can take all the questions towards the end.
yes,
If
yes, we can also do that. Yeah,
all right,
we
let's
can
do
move.
that. Yeah. So when it comes to contributing, right? this is basically the crux and the overall process of how you contribute to an open source project. So whenever you are working in a actual permanent job or a contract job in your day, job kind of situation, like let's say I'm working with AMD,
Hmm.
it is very important for me to get a clearance from my legal team, the AMD's legal team, before I start contributing to a particular open source project. Whether AMD touches that project or not is irrelevant. I should still get an approval from my legal team. For the simple reason that sometimes the work that you are doing is based off of some knowledge that you acquired while working at your current job, right?
Hmm.
And it may be a proprietary idea. And what if you accidentally, unknowingly, are submitting an open source change which includes that idea in part or in whole, or it violates some patent clauses of AMD, for example, right? So I should get the legal team to clear it out for me that yeah, I have no conflicts and I'm good to go. That is very important, because once you make a mistake like that where you put a proprietary code into an open source code, there is all sorts of legal problems for you as well as the open source project and the organization, and it's a whole lot of legal mess that people have to deal with. So it is better that we just check with the legal team internally, or if at any situation you can just ask your managers and find out whether we are good to go and commit to this particular open source project or not, or share with this project or not. So that is
Hmm.
very important and very underrated activity, but that is very important. We should do it. The next
Hmm.
is, you find a newbie task or you create one. So some of the examples we discussed in the slides earlier, you can create a task like that. And then you create a copy of that repository, which is called as a fork. And
Hmm.
once you do that, you make a copy of that in your local laptop, desktop machine, and then you create a new branch because you want to isolate your changes so that if you make any mistakes, you can just get rid of that branch and you don't affect your actual project copy.
Hmm.
So once you make your changes, you commit the changes in Git and you push it to the fork that you have. Once you have it in your fork, you can then open a pull request with the actual project,
Hmm.
and you can describe your change. What is it that you are changing? What is the ticket number? And what are the things you have done? And what is there any unit test involved? So you can mention as much detail as possible so that people who want to review your code, for them it is easy to understand what is it that you are trying to do in this code change suggestion.
Yep.
And feedback is a very key process of open source, right? So when you start out, it doesn't matter, people will give you some feedback. Someone
Hmm.
will ask you to fix certain lines in the code, someone will ask you to rewrite a part of your code, someone will not like the way you have named the variables because it's not compliant with the rest of the project. So whatever feedback you get, try to understand the feedback and try to get in an agreement with your reviewer that what is an acceptable solution for this feedback, right? So address that feedback. You might have to make multiple code changes or iterations to do that, but it is important to do it. Once all the feedback is addressed and the build is successful, the pull request will be merged by one of the committers or maintainers. So that is the overall process of contributing in general to any open source project. You basically get a copy, make the changes, address the feedback, and there you go. So that's how it works. And so some of the good etiquettes that is important to practice right from the start, and it will really help you as well as the project both to go forward, right? So subscribe to the dev and the user mailing list and participate. Being an audience will not help all the time. So when you participate, you will learn. And let's say you had a certain idea in mind and you don't know whether that thought or whether that understanding of that concept is correct for you or not. So when you reply and if it is incorrect, someone else might correct you on that thread, right? So you will learn. And learning is only going to happen when you make mistakes, when you fail in certain aspects, and that is a part of it, right? The next thing is do your homework before asking questions. So wherever there is a mailing list like this, there is a tendency for new joiners to simply ask a question, right? Nobody discourages you from asking a question, but people do not like it, right? When you've not done your homework. For example, I go and ask, where can I get the code base for this project, right? So that's not an acceptable question. Sure, someone will still respond to your question
Hmm.
because you have asked that question for the first time, but people will remember that you've been constantly asking these kind of questions. So, what should my homework be? I should go and check the website, and that will give me a link to the code base, and that will point me to README, contributor guidelines, etc. Right? So, do your homework before asking questions. If you have a question regarding the design, just read the architecture docs first, as much as you can understand. And when you ask questions, you clarify that what all you have done before asking these questions. So people will know that you're not somebody who just got this doubt and simply asked a question without even trying to search for the answers, right? So that is a key thing. We need to do our homework before we ask questions. And the next thing is public communication. So, open source projects, everything has to be open. You cannot make buddies with someone and then do everything offline and not at all communicate to the rest of the distribution list or the rest of the project members, right? So, keep everything open, communicate on mailing lists, Slack channels, or Discord servers, whatever they have. You communicate in a public fashion. If you have any feedback to give, write it on the Jira, write it on the pull request. You don't have to be afraid to speak your mind. That is one of the benefits of open source, that you don't have to worry about how people are going to judge you. So
Right.
that's key. And this is the most important one. This is actually the most important and most underrated one, is to be patient. So as a newcomer into the open source world, when you put a new code change out there, of course we have that excitement that yes, my change will go in tomorrow, and then I can happily boast about it, I can be proud of it, and I can talk about it on Twitter and LinkedIn that I made this contribution. Sure, we can, and that is important to do. But we have to also understand it's open source. A lot of those people are doing this stuff voluntarily,
Right.
and we need to respect their time and their bandwidth. So a large project like Apache Hadoop, which has, I don't know, maybe multiple tens of thousands of lines of code, and is used worldwide, right from banking to healthcare to security to every industry. It
Yeah.
has under 250 committers. So imagine this scale of the project being managed by less than 250 people, right? So you
Hmm.
cannot expect instant or even same day responses, especially when you are a newbie and you are suggesting a change. So be patient, give the committers a few days to review. If you don't get a response, gently nudge it and gently reach out to the dev mailing list, or reach out to the committer group on the Slack or whatever other communication channels they have, and just ask that if someone can review this, I'll be happy to address any feedback. So just be patient and be respectful, because sometimes people will say that, oh, your code is absolute trash, you need to rewrite this is not acceptable. So just don't get angry at things like that. Again, people are volunteering, they have too many things on plate, and as humans sometimes people make mistakes of not communicating something in the right way, right? So it's okay. I mean, we are humans, we make mistakes. So at least we can try to be respectful in our communication, and then hope that others also do the same. So that will ease out a lot of problem. And be open to accepting feedback. So one of the key tenets of working for open source is you have to be absolutely okay to accept feedback. If you're somebody who has problem or challenges accepting feedback, then open source is not for you, I would say that, because it is impossible to get any change moved in without any feedback. There will always be something that you may have missed, which someone will suggest you change. So if you take it on your ego that, oh, I posted something and then this guy always finds flaws in my work, that is not going to fly well for you. So accept feedback. It's okay. They are trying to help you so that you can contribute to the project, right?
Hmm.
So it's good to accept the feedback. And then respect the community decision. See, sometimes a change request or an enhancement that you feel is very important and you are very passionate about it, for many other reasons the community may not feel the same, right? Because they have been longer at that project, they know the depth, they know other use cases, And while you have been able to do the change, they may not accept your change, right?
Yeah.
So don't get angry, don't get mad at, oh, these guys are so ungrateful. I wrote free code for them and they don't even accept my changes. This is ridiculous, right? Don't be angry. Respect community decisions and understand their point of view, because it's very easy for me to write a piece of code and expect them to absorb it, but those are the people who are going to maintain the problems that arise out of that, right? So, and it's fair, that is why they don't want to do it, because maybe the design is not right, maybe it creates a dependency which causes a lot of problem for the end users to do that. So that's why it's important to respect community decisions.
Makes
And
sense.
all these resources that are posted here, I will leave it out. So there's a W3 Schools website which has a basic Git 101 course that you can do. It's free, so you don't have to sign up for any paid courses anywhere. There's a link for the AMD resource open source projects. And here is the ASF open source projects that I was talking about. So I know somebody asked it earlier, how do they find the projects? So see, here are the names of all the projects that they have, right? So look at that list, right? I've been scrolling and finally it ends. So, so don't tell me you can't find an open source project for yourself from here, right? So that's just one of them. And then this is the Cloud Native Foundation. So they have a lot of projects here. So yeah, see, that's Kubernetes, that HCD, that's Fluentd. All these projects are here. Prometheus is here, and so you can look at all these projects. Like, let's say, of course, Kubernetes is so popular. But if you want to find out something about any project, you just go click on the link and you can read through the project. You can understand what's happening in the project, right? So let's say if you want to understand about Apache Hadoop, right? So we just go click the link. Here is the base website of that project. It leads us to that website, right? And then you find out whatever detail you want to find out from this page about that project, right? So let me maximize this. Yeah. So see, getting started page is here. So if you click here, you will probably learn about, okay, what are the ways, how do you install the software, what is the required software, what are the platforms, etc. Right. So this is about the users. But then how do you develop, right? So you see there's a how to contribute here. There's how do you track the issue, how do you do version control, right? So all these are here. So let's go to how to contribute. See, so you have the entire dev environment set up here, how to get the source code. So imagine if I just go to the DL and say, hey, how do I get the Hadoop source code? Obviously, they're not going to be happy because they built a whole website to answer these kind of questions, right? So, we just do 5 minutes of digging and you have majority answers here. See how to make a change, how to generate the patch, how to contribute your work, how to stay involved. Everything is listed here, right? So that is basically how every project works. They may have different tools that they use, but pretty much all of it works in the same way. And this is the example of the individual contributor license agreement, right? So you mention your name and all the other contact details, and then you say, I accept. So see, they will talk about that you are granting copyright license to the project. So you are giving away any rights and it's royalty free. So you cannot charge the project to accept your changes and use
Right.
your code bases, right? So any patents and stuff, so all those criterias, right, the legal side of things are defined here. So if you agree, you sign it, and only then you can start contributing to the project. So this is an example for the Apache Software Foundation, but every open source project or community will have something like this in order to ensure that from legal side there are no hassles, there's no issues. And so after the presentation, I have a repository called presentations in my GitHub profile. This entire slide deck will be posted in this repository, so don't worry about it. And it will also be posted under the Hacker Ranks post as well, so you'll have it. And I guess we are done. We can move on to the. We can just take all the questions that people have now. Let's go for it.
Yes. So as Dinesh mentioned, you can always go to his GitHub and access the presentation from there. He will also put up a link to the Google Slides to this LinkedIn live stream as well, so you can always come in
Right.
and watch the video. If you want to follow the slides, you can click on it. You can get the presentation also. So
Correct.
everything will be there. Like you don't have to worry about noting down anything. It will all be there. So yes, so let's take up a few more questions. If anybody has any other questions, you can just put it down on the chat. We are just going to take questions now. So
Sure.
yeah, you have a lot of time to do that. Okay. So let's start from yeah. So Neha asks, what skills are polished because of contributions? I think you covered it quite well, like both technical and non-technical,
Yeah.
right? And then Imtiaz asks, can you list some open source projects for beginners? Um,
I mean, every project is for beginners. You just have to find beginner level tasks in those projects. So yeah, that answers that.
yeah, so you have basically covered all the questions. Like I'm reading through the question, and I'm like, okay, he has answered this, he has answered this. So yeah.
No worries. No worries.
Um, oh, wait. Okay, so Ayush has asked, is contributing to big organizations the way to go, or is it okay to put changes for individual people's repo?
If I understood your question, that you're saying that should we contribute to projects that are managed by large organizations, or should we contribute to projects that are, managed in isolation? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
I think that's the question.
So it doesn't matter, right? For example, Kubernetes was created by Google. So would you not want to contribute to Kubernetes just because it's created by a firm as large as Google, or you want to contribute to Apache Flink, which is not from as large an organization, or from Apache Ozone, my previous employer Cloudera, right? So the scale of the project doesn't matter. It all boils back to your interest. What is your interest area, and if you find an interesting project, even if it is managed and sponsored by a large organization, it is okay to contribute. There's no issues there. If at all anything, it might open more doors for you, right? Because if it's a company that manages that project, they will realize that, oh, there is this guy who's been contributing to our project in a sustained fashion and has brought in some meaningful contributions. And we need a developer role in this team, that team. So they'll be like, oh, let's ask this guy. Because see, for them, it's very easy. They don't have to spend onboarding of 3 months for you. You are already up to speed with the project. So for them, it's a win. And for you, it might end up being a win that, you also don't have to spend that much of time to ramp up in a new organization, new project, and new skill set, right? So you already know, you hit the ground running and be a rock star.
Right? That makes sense. Um, so we have a question. If organizations change the project from open source to private, then what happens to individual contribution?
If they change it to private, whatever was done in the past stays the way it was, right? You cannot like undo those changes. It is what it is. And what that
Hmm.
means for the future is that you can no longer make open source contributions to those projects. But in today's times, right, generally it's the other way around. Generally what happens is people start with a proprietary closed source project, they develop it, they reap the benefits and enhance it, and when they see that this project has a scope of going to another level and they cannot do it alone, that is when they make it open source, right? So Hadoop started as a research project somewhere. Eventually, it became open source, and look what Hadoop has become. Like everybody knows the meaning of the word Hadoop. Even if they don't write code, they know what Hadoop is. Like
That's
Hadoop
true.
has replaced the name for big data. People generally say, "Oh, I do Hadoop." Nobody says I do big data now. So that's the situation. People do it reverse. They start with the proprietary stuff and then they make it open source.
That's true. So another question that I have for you is, so because open source is like volunteering, you're doing it separately from your day job. So how do you manage time trying to shuffle between both, and like how much time would you spend in a day to like make open source contributions? Is there like a fixed amount or is it variable?
It's purely variable. Again, it boils down to interest, right? See, if you are interested in a particular hobby,
Hmm.
regardless of how busy your day is, you will always try to find time and squeeze in time for that hobby or for that activity. So same goes for here. Yes, there are certain things that help you do that. For example, your day job involves contributing to an open source project, for example, right? If that is the case, easy, right? 8 hours of your work or 9 hours of your work, most of it you're contributing to open source and you are satisfied, right? And sometimes it will not happen. Like when I started first contributing to Hadoop and Ozone, my day job was not on the engineering side. It was more on the customer relationship management and technical account management side at Hortonworks and Cloudera. But I used to do it in parallel after my office hours because I had bandwidth and that was something I wanted to do at that point in life. So I did it. And eventually I moved on from that role into a more open source focused role. So it's just about changing priorities in life and interest and how you can squeeze time. So you have to find your own balance. There is no set rule that you should contribute open source, like 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week or 1 hour a week. It's you finding your balance, and that is why it's open source. They cannot come, someone cannot come and say this is the output I expect from you from the first month, otherwise you're fired from this project. Because it's open source, nobody cares about that.
Right. Makes sense. So okay, so if I don't see any other new questions, all the
Okay.
other questions that I see, Dinesh has already answered them in the talk, so you can go and refer to his slides or watch the talk again. You will get answers to all of your questions because he has covered everything in detail. So I think we can now conclude the live stream. But I want to leave you with one final question. That
Sure.
is, um, what is your top three advices for people who are going to start with their open source contribution journey today?
Okay. First one is be patient because there will be a lot of unknowns here, a lot of things that you cannot understand at the beginning, and it will be very easy to give up, right? You try to read the website and you are like, what is this complex project? They're talking about scaling distributed systems and whatnot. And then you'll be like, oh, it's too much. Let me just go on to my job and I have something to work. I'll do that. So it's very easy to give up in the beginning. And it is equally rewarding if you stick through that phase. So be patient. Don't lose faith in your own abilities, right? Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. Don't waste your time with this man. Just go on. So just be patient. That's the first key advice. The second advice is follow your passion. Very simple. If you are a front end guy, there is no way that you will like working in a back end project, right? If that is not your interest area, yes, you will start, you might be able to do some contributions, but you won't stick around there for a long time. That is the problem. So if you follow your passion, then everything else falls in place. It's like a domino effect. So if you like front end, you find a front end project. You even find time, even if you are busy, even if you have a family and kids to manage, you will still find time, and you will still find time to go to meetings and conferences related to that category of the project. So you have to follow the passion. And lastly is be open to learn. You can never be done with learning, especially with open source. There is always new things to learn, there's always new things to implement, there's always new things to troubleshoot. So be open to learning, be open to putting in the effort and the hard work to understand and contribute, and be open to collaborating and sharing what you know and asking questions. So that is what it is, right? The key things that I can say. Because if you do all of these things, trust me, you can be a great open source contributor, irrespective of what time in your career you start doing that. Whether you're a fresher or whether you are already an experienced professional. So I started working in 2010. I only started doing open source in 2016, 2017 actually, the first set of contributions, but my core contribution started from 2018, only 4 years ago from now. And before I knew it, like I'm committer and PMC. So all this just to say that it's not unachievable, right? If I can do it, anybody can do it. So that is the way I say, right? So just do these things and you'll get there. Yeah.
That I think is like the biggest motivation. Like I feel very motivated to go and start with open source contributions, like the way you have framed this entire live stream, the way you talked about it, and the advice that you left with us. I think all of us are very motivated now, including me. So I really thank you for giving us time today to teach something that we could take a lot from. I'm pretty sure that the audience enjoyed today as well. If you like the live stream, you can always go and connect with Dinesh on LinkedIn. You can drop him a
Absolutely.
message that you love the session, or if you have any questions, you can always go ahead and reach out to him. I'm pretty sure he'll be more than happy to answer it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That goes without saying, right? For, I mean, whoever you might be, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just drop a message if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer and clarify. And I would also encourage you guys to do the same, meaning that once you become seasoned contributors, please be open to sharing, because somebody shared their knowledge with me, somebody shared their expertise with me, and made me eligible to be contributing to open source and giving this session out here. So it's like a cycle that has to flow. So that sharing of knowledge has to continue wherever you might be, and that will build more open source engineers around the globe. Yeah.
Thank you again for your time. I also thank the audience for coming in today. Like they've come in huge numbers to watch you, and I'm pretty sure like I hope that you all could get some learning from the session. If you did, you can always reach out to Dinesh again. So yeah,
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking time. It was really a pleasure and honor to be sharing my journey, and seeing you all here. Thank you so much.
yeah. So this concludes the live stream. Thank you again for all of you for being here. I will now conclude the live stream.
Thank you so much. Cheers, guys.